Marcus Chen wiped his sweaty palms on his jeans for the third time in 5 minutes. The sleek transport ship hummed around him, its alien technology far beyond anything Earth had produced even after first contact 3 years ago. Through the transparent aluminum viewports, he could see the massive space station growing larger by the minute. The Nexus Prime looked like a crystalline flower blooming in the void of space, its petals made of gleaming metal and energy fields that pulsed with rainbow colors. "Stop fidgeting," Zara said from beside him, though her voice carried amusement rather than annoyance. Her hand found his, and, immediately he felt calmer. That was part of her nature as a veil fairy, what humans crudely called succubi. Physical contact with her species naturally soothed other beings, though Marcus had learned it was much more complex than simple emotional manipulation. "Easy for you to say," Marcus replied, turning to look at his girlfriend of 8 months. Zara was beautiful in a way that made his heart skip even now. Her skin had a subtle lavender hue that shifted to deeper purple along her arms and the elegant horns that curved back from her forehead. Her eyes were large and luminous, colored like amethysts, and her hair fell in waves of silver white down to her shoulders. She wore a flowing dress that seemed to be made of starlight itself, shifting and shimmering with each movement. "Your family thinks humans are barbaric primitives who barely understand fire," Marcus continued. "And that's just what you've told me. I can only imagine what they haven't said." Zara's expression grew serious. She turned in her seat to face him fully, taking both of his hands in hers. Her touch was warm, and he could feel the gentle pulse of her empathic abilities, not trying to manipulate his emotions but simply offering comfort. "Marcus, listen to me," she said, her accent giving her words a musical quality. "My family's opinions about humans come from ignorance and old prejudices. The Veil Fairy have been part of the Galactic Council for over 2,000 years. We've seen species rise and fall, and we become cautious about newcomers." "Cautious is one word for it," Marcus muttered. He'd done his research before agreeing to this trip. The Veil Fairy were one of the most influential species in the galaxy, their empathic and psychic abilities making them natural diplomats and mediators. They were also notorious for their sense of superiority over younger species. "But you're different," Zara continued, squeezing his hands. "You've shown me that humans have something special. Something my people haven't seen in centuries." "What's that?" "Hope," she said simply. "Pure, stubborn, impossible hope. Your species looks at the vastness of space and doesn't see obstacles. You see possibilities. When the Craxi invaded your solar system, what did humans do?" Marcus smiled despite his nervousness. "We stole their technology, reverse-engineered it in 6 months, and built better weapons than they had." "Exactly. Any other species would have either surrendered or fought conventionally and lost. Humans did the impossible." Zara's eyes sparkled with admiration. "That's why I fell in love with you, Marcus Chen. Not just you personally, though you are wonderful, but your entire impossible species." The ship shuddered slightly as they entered the station's docking bay. Marcus looked out to see a vast hangar filled with ships from dozens of different species. Crystalline vessels from the Zephyrians, bioships from the Hive Collective that looked like massive insects, and sleek predatory craft from the warrior clans of Theta Draconis. "Attention passengers," came the pilot's voice over the intercom, speaking in perfect galactic standard. "We have arrived at Nexus Prime. Please prepare for docking procedures." Marcus stood and straightened his jacket. He'd chosen to wear his dress uniform from his time in the Earth Defense Force, the deep blue fabric adorned with ribbons from the Battle of Europa and the Siege of Mars. Zara had suggested it might help him feel more confident, and she was right. The familiar weight of the uniform reminded him that he wasn't just some random human. He was Lieutenant Commander Marcus Chen, veteran of humanity's first interstellar war. "Do I look presentable?" he asked Zara. She stood and smoothed down his collar, her touch sending a pleasant tingle through his skin. "You look magnificent. Like a warrior poet from the old stories. I'm pretty sure your family won't see it that way. Then, they'll learn better." There was steel in Zara's voice now, and Marcus was reminded that for all her gentle nature, she came from a line of powerful empaths who had shaped galactic politics for millennia. "My family needs to understand that the galaxy is changing, Marcus. Species like yours are going to be the future, not relics like us clinging to ancient glories. The docking process completed with barely a tremor. As they gathered their luggage, Marcus noticed other passengers giving him curious looks. Most were clearly wealthy or influential aliens heading to the neutral meeting ground of Nexus Prime. A human in their midst was unusual enough to draw attention. "Stay close to me," Zara whispered as they approached the exit. Station protocol can be complex for newcomers. The airlock hissed open, and Marcus got his first taste of truly alien air. It was clean and slightly sweet, with an underlying hint of ozone that spoke of advanced atmospheric processors. The gravity felt about 10% lighter than Earth normal, making each step feel bouncy and strange. The docking bay beyond was a marvel of engineering that took Marcus's breath away. The ceiling arched high overhead, supported by graceful pillars that seemed to be grown rather than built. Bioluminescent strips provided soft, even lighting that shifted in color from blue to green to gold in slow waves. Beings from across the galaxy moved through the space with purpose, their various forms and technologies creating a symphony of diversity. "This way," Zara said, guiding him toward a bank of what looked like glass tubes. Transit system. Marcus watched as aliens stepped into the tubes and simply vanished. Teleportation? Matter displacement. Short range only, but it gets us across the station quickly. Zara stepped into one of the tubes and gestured for him to follow. "Just step in and think about where you want to go. The system reads your intentions." Marcus hesitated for a moment, then stepped into the tube beside her. The world dissolved into sparkling light, and for an instant he felt as though he was falling through space itself. Then, reality reasserted itself, and he found himself standing in what was clearly a residential section of the station. The corridors here were wider and more elegantly appointed, with walls that seemed to be made of some kind of living crystal that pulsed gently with inner light. Gardens lined the walkways, filled with plants from 100 different worlds, their alien flowers releasing fragrances that made his head spin. "Sector 7, Zara announced. "The diplomatic quarter. My family maintains quarters here for official business." As they walked, Marcus became aware of other beings watching him with interest. A group of crystalline Zephyrians chimed softly to each other as he passed. A massive Cronin warrior, easily 8 feet tall and covered in natural armor plating, nodded respectfully when it noticed his uniform. Even a cluster of the mysterious Voidwalkers, beings of pure energy contained in environmental suits, seemed to pause in their gliding movement to observe him. "Is it always like this?" Marcus asked. "Like what?" Everyone's staring. "I feel like I'm an exhibit in a zoo." Zara's expression grew thoughtful. "Humans are still very new to the galactic community. Most species here have had thousands of years to establish their reputations and relationships. You represent something unknown and unpredictable." "Wonderful. No pressure at all." They stopped before a door that seemed to be made of flowing water held in a vertical plane. Zara placed her palm against a scanner beside it, and the water door rippled and became transparent. "My family will be gathered in the main chamber," she said, her voice carrying a note of nervousness for the first time since they'd met. "Marcus, I should warn you about something." "More warnings?" "You're really boosting my confidence here. It's not about you specifically. It's about Veiltheri customs." She turned to face him, her expression serious. "My people are empaths. We can sense emotions, surface thoughts, even memories if the connection is strong enough. It's considered rude to shield your mind completely, but it's also rude to probe too deeply without permission. So they're going to be reading my mind. Only the emotional surface. Think of it like body language, but more precise." Zara reached up to touch his cheek gently. "Don't try to hide what you're feeling. They'll respect honesty more than deception." "And, Marcus?" "Yeah? Remember that I chose you. Not because you're human, and not despite it. Because you're you." The water door dissolved entirely, revealing a spacious chamber beyond. Marcus took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and followed Zara inside. The room was breathtaking, with a domed ceiling that showed a perfect view of the stars outside. The walls were covered in what looked like living tapestries that shifted and moved, telling stories in flowing images. Comfortable seating areas were arranged around the space, and soft music played from no visible source. But Marcus barely noticed the decor, because his attention was immediately captured by the beings waiting for them. There were 5 Veiltheri in the room, and Marcus could immediately see the family resemblance to Zara. They all had the same elegant horns, the same luminous eyes, though each had variations in skin tone and hair color. What struck him most was their presence. Each one radiated an aura of power and authority that made the air itself seem to thicken. The eldest, a male with deep purple skin and silver hair, rose from his seat as they entered. He was tall and imposing, wearing robes that seemed to be cut from the fabric of space itself, decorated with patterns that hurt to look at directly. Zarathalnara, he said, his voice carrying harmonics that resonated in Marcus's bones. You have returned. Hello, father, Zara replied, and Marcus could hear the formality in her tone. She'd never used that particular cadence when speaking to him. Zara's father's gaze shifted to Marcus, and the human felt as though he was being examined under a microscope. Those amethyst eyes seemed to see straight through to his soul, weighing and measuring everything they found there. And this, the elder Veiltheri continued, is the human. His name is Marcus Chen, Zara said firmly. Marcus, this is my father, Kethrold Antorvac, speaker for the Veiltheri delegation to the Galactic Council. Marcus stepped forward and executed what he hoped was an appropriate bow. He'd studied Veiltheri customs during the journey, but theory and practice were different things. Honored speaker, he said, using the formal address Zara had taught him. I am grateful for your hospitality. Kethrold studied him for a long moment, and Marcus felt a strange tingling sensation, as though invisible fingers were gently probing at the edges of his mind. It wasn't unpleasant, exactly, but it was definitely alien. Interesting, Kethrold said finally. Your mental patterns are unusual. Father, Zara said, a warning note in her voice. Peace, daughter. I meant no insult. Kethrold moved closer to Marcus, circling him slowly. Human minds are chaotic things, from what we've observed. Constantly generating random thoughts and emotions, shifting between topics with no apparent logic. But yours. Father, please don't psychoanalyze my boyfriend in the first 5 minutes of meeting him. Your thoughts are focused, Kethrold continued as though Zara hadn't spoken. Disciplined. You've had training in mental techniques. Marcus nodded. Military meditation training. Helps with stress management and decision-making under pressure. Fascinating. And you're not afraid. I'm terrified, Marcus admitted with a slight smile. But fear doesn't help anyone, so I'm setting it aside for now. For the first time, Kethrold's expression showed something that might have been approval. A pragmatic approach. Perhaps humans are not as primitive as our reports suggested. A new voice spoke from across the room, feminine and melodious but carrying an edge of skepticism. Don't mistake discipline for wisdom, husband. Marcus turned to see another Veiltheri approaching. This one was clearly Zara's mother, sharing her daughter's elegant features but with skin that shifted between deep blue and violet. Her hair was long and dark, braided with what looked like tiny stars that provided their own illumination. Marcus, Zara said, this is my mother, Yelena Dorthak. Marcus bowed again. Honored lady. Yelena studied him with the same intensity as her husband, but her mental touch felt different. Where Kethrold had been clinical and analytical, she seemed to be examining his emotional connections. You love my daughter, she said finally. Yes, ma'am. Very much. And she loves you. Yelena's expression was unreadable. Though I confess I don't understand why. Mother! Zara protested. It's a fair question, Marcus said calmly. I've wondered the same thing myself. Yelena's eyebrows rose slightly. Explain. Marcus thought for a moment, aware that everyone in the room was listening intently. Your daughter is brilliant, compassionate, and powerful in ways I'm only beginning to understand. She could have chosen anyone in the galaxy. I'm just a soldier from a backwater planet whose species barely figured out faster than light travel. And yet she chose you, Yelena observed. Why do you think that is? Because I see her, Marcus said simply. Not her species, not her abilities, not what she can do for me or my people. Just her. Zara. The woman who laughs at terrible jokes and stays up late reading poetry from civilizations that died before my planet had multicellular life. Who cries during sad movies even though she can literally feel the actor's emotions and knows it's all pretend. The room had grown very quiet. Marcus realized he was probably revealing more than was wise, but Zara had told him to be honest. She chose me because when I look at her, I don't see an alien or a potential ally or a diplomatic opportunity, he continued. I see the woman I want to spend the rest of my life with, however long or short that might be. Yelena stared at him for a long moment, then turned to her husband. Marcus caught a flicker of what might have been communication passing between them, the kind of wordless exchange that came from centuries of partnership. Bring him to the others, Yelena said finally. This should be educational. As they moved deeper into the chamber, Marcus became aware of the remaining family members. There was Zara's older brother, Theclon, who watched Marcus with undisguised suspicion. His skin was darker than his sister's, almost a deep indigo, and his horns were more pronounced. He wore what looked like military dress uniform, though from no service Marcus recognized. So, Theclon said as they approached, "You're the human who thinks he's worthy of my sister." "I don't think I'm worthy of her," Marcus replied honestly. "But I'm trying to become someone who might be." The answer seemed to surprise Theclon. "At least you're honest about your inadequacies." "Theclon," Zara said sharply. "Behave yourself." "I'm simply being practical, sister. This human species has been part of the galactic community for less than a solar cycle. They have no understanding of our customs, our history, our responsibilities. How can he possibly comprehend what it means to be involved with our family?" Marcus felt his temper start to rise, but he kept his voice level. "You're right. I don't understand a lot about your customs or your history. But I'm learning. And I understand more than you might think about responsibility." "Do you?" Theclon moved closer, and Marcus could feel the pressure of his mental presence like a weight against his consciousness. "Do you understand that my sister is not just some random veil fairy? She is a daughter of the speaker's line. Her choices affect not just herself, but our entire people standing in the galactic community." "I understand that she's important," Marcus said. "I also understand that she's her own person, not a political tool." "How very human of you," Theclon said with a sneer. "Individual desires above collective responsibility. It's exactly what I would expect from your species." "Theclon, enough," Kethril said, but his tone carried more curiosity than anger. "Let the human speak for himself." Marcus looked around the room, taking in the faces watching him. He could feel their mental pressure, the weight of their combined attention and skepticism. For a moment, he felt very small and very alone. Then, he thought about why he was here. Not to impress these people or win their approval, but to stand beside the woman he loved as she shared this part of her life with him. "You want to know if I understand responsibility?" Marcus said, his voice carrying the authority he'd learned as an officer. "Let me tell you about responsibility, Theclon." He turned to address the whole room, his military bearing coming to the fore. 3 years ago, when the Craxi invaded our system, I was a junior lieutenant on a patrol ship. We were outgunned, outmatched, and had no business fighting an interstellar empire. But we did it anyway, because that's what humans do when someone threatens our home. The room had grown very still. Marcus could feel their attention intensifying, but now it felt like genuine interest rather than mere skepticism. "I watched friends die defending settlements they'd never seen, protecting people they'd never met," Marcus continued. "I saw a maintenance engineer jury-rig a fusion reactor to explode just to take out a Craxi dreadnought. She stayed behind to make sure the detonation worked. Her name was Sarah Martinez, and she had 2 kids and a garden full of tomatoes she was worried about." Zara moved closer to him, and he felt her hand slip into his. The contact steadied him, reminded him that he wasn't alone. "That's what responsibility means to humans," Marcus said. It means standing up for what matters, even when the odds are impossible. It means making sacrifices for people you care about. And it means admitting when you're wrong and trying to do better. He looked directly at Theklan. So yes, I understand responsibility. I understand that loving Zara means I'm not just dating her, I'm connecting myself to your family, your people, your politics. I understand that my actions reflect on her and on the relationship between our species. And does that frighten you? Yelena asked softly. Marcus smiled, and, for the first time since entering the room, he felt completely honest and unguarded. Terrifies me. But some things are worth being terrified for. The silence that followed stretched for long moments. Marcus could see expressions shifting around the room, mental conversations happening at speeds beyond human comprehension. Finally, Kethril spoke. There is wisdom in terror, young human. Fear keeps us humble, keeps us careful. He moved to a side table and picked up what looked like a crystal decanter filled with golden liquid. Perhaps we should start this introduction again, with proper hospitality. As Kethril began preparing drinks, Marcus felt some of the tension leave the room. Zara squeezed his hand and smiled at him, and he could see pride and love shining in her eyes. You did well, she whispered. The day's young yet, he whispered back. But, as he looked around the room, seeing curiosity replacing hostility in most of the faces watching him, Marcus began to think that maybe, just maybe, this impossible situation might work out after all. The golden liquid Kethril poured turned out to be a traditional Veiltheri greeting drink, something that enhanced empathic connections while providing a mild euphoric effect. As they sat in a circle and shared the ceremonial cups, Marcus found himself relaxing despite the alien setting and the weight of expectations on his shoulders. The youngest member of the family, Zara's sister Nyxera, seemed the most curious about him. She appeared to be roughly equivalent to a human teenager, with bright copper-colored skin and an infectious enthusiasm that reminded Marcus of Zara when she got excited about something new. Is it true that humans can't sense emotions directly? Nyxera asked, her mental voice bubbling with curiosity as the ceremonial drink took effect and lowered the barriers between minds in the circle. Not the way your people do, Marcus replied, surprised to find that he could somehow respond mentally as well as vocally. We read body language, facial expressions, tone of voice. But we don't feel what others are feeling. How lonely that must be, Nyxera said, and Marcus could feel genuine sympathy radiating from her. We don't know any different, Marcus said with a smile. But, since I've been with Zara, I'm starting to understand what we're missing. As the conversation continued, Marcus found himself sharing stories of human culture and history, while the Veiltheri family reciprocated with tales of their own past. He learned that Kethril had been present at first contact with 17 different species, helping to negotiate peaceful integration into the galactic community. Yelena was a renowned artist whose empathic sculptures were displayed in galleries across 3 star systems. Theklan, despite his initial hostility, turned out to be a military strategist who had studied human tactics during the Craxi War with professional interest. Your asymmetric warfare doctrines were innovative, he admitted grudgingly. Desperate people get creative, Marcus replied. We couldn't match their technology, so we had to outthink them. And, did you? Outthink them? Marcus grinned. We're still here, aren't we? As the evening progressed, Marcus began to understand the complex dynamics of this alien family. They were ancient and powerful, with responsibilities and connections that spanned the galaxy. But, underneath all the politics and protocol, they were still a family who loved each other and wanted the best for their children. The real test, he was beginning to realize, wasn't whether they would accept him as worthy of their daughter. It was whether he could navigate the complexities of their world without losing himself in the process. And, as Zara's hand found his again under the cover of the ceremonial circle, Marcus began to think that maybe, with her help, he just might manage it. The next morning brought new challenges that Marcus hadn't expected. He woke in guest quarters that Zara had shown him to the night before, feeling groggy from both the time dilation of interstellar travel and the lingering effects of the ceremonial drink. The room was comfortable but alien, with walls that seemed to breathe slowly and furniture that adjusted itself to his presence. A soft chime indicated someone at his door. Marcus quickly dressed and opened it to find a young Veiltheri he didn't recognize, wearing what appeared to be formal messenger attire. Marcus Chen of Terra, the messenger asked in accented galactic standard.
That's me.
The messenger handed him an elegant crystalline tablet. The Council of Matriarchs requests your presence at the third bell. Formal attire is required. Marcus stared at the tablet as the messenger departed. The text displayed on its surface was in flowing Veiltheri script that somehow rearranged itself into English as he watched. A formal invitation to meet with what appeared to be a group of the most senior Veiltheri women on the station.
Oh hell, Marcus muttered.
The door chimed again, and, this time it was Zara. She took one look at the tablet in his hands and, her expression grew concerned. The matriarchs, she asked.
You know about this?
Zara sank into the room's single chair, which immediately adjusted to accommodate her different physiology. I was hoping they wouldn't involve themselves so quickly.
The Council of Matriarchs is, well, think of them as the informal power behind all Veiltheri politics.
They're not technically part of the government, but nothing important happens without their approval.
And they want to meet me.
They want to evaluate you, Zara corrected.
Marcus, I need you to understand something. My family accepting you is one thing.
But, if the matriarchs disapprove, it could affect far more than just our relationship. Marcus sat on the edge of the bed, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders again.
What kind of effects are we talking about?
Political ones. Trade agreements between our species, cultural exchange programs, even military cooperation. Zara stood and began pacing, a nervous habit he'd learned to recognize.
The matriarchs don't just represent Veiltheri interests. They're part of an informal network that influences policy across dozens of species. So if I screw this up, I might damage human-alien relations across the galaxy.
You won't screw it up, Zara said firmly. But, yes, the stakes are higher than I originally anticipated. Marcus stood and walked to the room's viewport, looking out at the vast structure of Nexus Prime. Ships came and went in a constant stream, representatives of hundreds of different worlds and civilizations. The scale of it all made him feel small. What do they want from me? He asked.
Honestly? I'm not sure. Zara joined him at the viewport. The matriarchs work in ways that even my family doesn't always understand. They see patterns and connections across centuries of galactic politics. If they're interested in you, it's because they see something significant.
Great.
No pressure.
Zara turned him to face her, her hands warm on his shoulders.
Marcus, listen to me. Be yourself. That's all you can do, and it's what's gotten you this far.
2 hours later, Marcus found himself walking through a section of the station he hadn't seen before. The architecture here was older, more organic, with corridors that curved like the inside of massive shells. The lighting was softer, more amber than the bright white of the diplomatic quarters. His guide was another young Veiltheri, this one apparently mute, who communicated entirely through gentle telepathic nudges. Marcus found the experience oddly soothing, like being guided by warm thoughts instead of words. They stopped before a door that seemed to be grown from living wood, its surface covered in intricate carvings that moved and shifted when he wasn't looking directly at them. The guide gestured for him to enter, then departed without a sound.
Marcus took a deep breath and pushed through the door.
The chamber beyond was unlike anything he'd experienced. It was vast, far larger than should have been possible given the station's architecture, with a domed ceiling that showed not space but what appeared to be an alien sky. Ancient trees grew throughout the space, their leaves rustling in a breeze he couldn't feel. Streams of water flowed in impossible directions, sometimes upward along the walls, creating a gentle musical sound. And, throughout this garden sat the matriarchs.
There were 7 of them, each clearly ancient even by Veiltheri standards.
Their skin had taken on deeper hues with age, ranging from midnight purple to deep emerald green. Their horns were more elaborate than those of younger Veiltheri, carved with symbols that seemed to shift and change as he watched. They sat in a circle around a pool of water that reflected not the ceiling above but stars and nebulae from somewhere else entirely. As Marcus approached, he could feel their combined mental presence like a warm tide washing over him. Marcus Chen of Terra, one of them spoke, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated in his bones.
We welcome you to the Heart Chamber.
Marcus bowed as formally as he could manage.
Honored matriarchs, I am grateful for this audience.
Sit, another commanded, gesturing to a simple stone seat that hadn't been there moments before.
We would know you better.
As Marcus settled onto the seat, he felt the stone warm beneath him, somehow conforming to his body in a way that was perfectly comfortable.
The matriarchs watched him with eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of millennia.
You love the young Zarathelnara, the first matriarch stated.
It wasn't a question. Yes, honored one.
And she loves you. This from a third matriarch, her skin the color of deep forest jade. An unusual pairing, even in these changing times. We have observed your species, said a fourth, her voice carrying undertones that made Marcus think of distant thunder.
Humans are volatile. Quick to anger, quick to fight.
You war among yourselves even as you face external threats. Marcus felt a flare of defensive anger and immediately suppressed it. These beings could probably sense his emotional reactions as clearly as if he'd shouted them. We do fight among ourselves, he admitted.
We're not perfect.
But we also come together when it matters.
And we're learning.
Learning, mused a fifth matriarch, this one with silver skin that seemed to glow with its own light.
An interesting word. What are you learning, young human? Marcus thought carefully before answering.
That the universe is bigger and more complex than we ever imagined. That there are wonders and terrors out there beyond our comprehension. But also that intelligence and compassion aren't limited to any single species. And what of power? Asked the sixth matriarch.
Your species seeks it, does it not? Seeks to expand, to grow, to influence others?
Some of us do, Marcus said honestly. But some of us are content to find our place in something larger than ourselves.
The seventh and final matriarch had remained silent until now.
She was the eldest, her skin so deep a purple it was almost black, her horns elaborately carved with what looked like star maps. When she spoke, her mental voice seemed to come from everywhere at once.
Show us your memories, Marcus Chen of Terra. The request hit him like a physical blow. What?
Your memories of the war, the eldest continued. We would understand how humans fight, how they think, how they choose to sacrifice. Marcus looked around the circle of ancient faces, feeling suddenly very young and very mortal.
I don't know how to do that. We will guide you, the first matriarch said gently. Simply do not resist.
Before Marcus could protest, he felt their minds touching his.
It wasn't the gentle empathic contact he'd experienced with Zara or even the clinical examination from her father.
This was deeper, more thorough, like having his entire consciousness gently dissected and examined. But, instead of feeling violated, Marcus found himself trusting these ancient beings. There was something profoundly maternal about their presence, as though he was being held and comforted even as his deepest memories were laid bare. The Battle of Europa flowed through his consciousness. He relived the terror of watching Craxi dreadnoughts emerge from hyperspace, their weapons turning the ice moon's surface into vapor and flame. He felt again the desperate determination as his small patrol ship dove into the enemy formation, firing everything they had at targets that seemed invulnerable. The matriarchs experienced his memories of watching the maintenance engineer, Sarah Martinez, jury-rigging the reactor that would destroy a Craxi command ship. They felt his grief as he watched her die in the explosion, and his fierce pride in her courage. They sought his memories of the aftermath, when human survivors worked alongside former enemies to rebuild what had been destroyed. The slow, careful negotiations that had led to peace, and the even slower process of learning to trust each other. Through it all, Marcus felt their ancient wisdom evaluating not just what he had done, but why he had done it. They probed his motivations, his fears, his hopes for the future. When the mental contact finally ended, Marcus found himself slumped forward in his chair, emotionally exhausted. The matriarchs sat in silence for long moments, apparently communicating among themselves at speeds beyond his comprehension.
Finally, the eldest spoke again.
We have seen much, Marcus Chen of Terra.
Your species is indeed young and volatile. But there is something else. What do you see, honored one?
Potential, she said simply. Your species has the capacity for both great destruction and great compassion. Which path you choose will determine not just your own fate, but the fate of many others. The silver-skinned matriarch leaned forward.
We have a proposal for you, young human. Marcus straightened, sensing that something important was coming. The Galactic Council is considering a new initiative, she continued.
Joint colonies, where multiple species work together to establish settlements on unclaimed worlds.
It would be an unprecedented experiment in interspecies cooperation. What does that have to do with me? The Council needs representatives, the jade-skinned matriarch explained. Individuals who can bridge the gap between different ways of thinking.
Who can find common ground where others see only differences. Marcus felt his heart begin to race.
You're offering me a job? We are offering you an opportunity, the eldest corrected.
To help shape the future relationship between species. To be part of something larger than any single world or civilization.
And, Zara? Marcus asked.
The matriarchs exchanged glances, and Marcus could sense amusement in their mental voices.
Young Zara Thalnera has already been selected for the program, the first matriarch said. Did you think this meeting was only about you? Marcus blinked in surprise. She knew?
She suspected, the forest green matriarch said.
The young one is quite perceptive.
She understood that our interest in you went beyond mere romantic approval.
So this is all some kind of test?
Everything is a test, young human, the eldest said with what might have been amusement.
The question is whether you pass or fail. Marcus stood and walked to the edge of the impossible pool, staring down at the alien stars reflected in its surface.
He thought about his life on Earth, his career in the Defense Force, the quiet apartment he'd called home. It all seemed very small and distant now.
If I accept, he said slowly, what would I be giving up?
Your old life, the silver matriarch said bluntly. Your old assumptions about what's possible.
Your old limitations. And what would I gain?
The chance to help write the next chapter of galactic history, the eldest replied. The opportunity to prove that your species belongs among the stars. And the love of a remarkable young Veiltheri who believes in you more than you believe in yourself. Marcus turned back to face the circle of ancient beings.
How do I know I'm qualified for something like this? You survived first contact with an overwhelming enemy, the thunder-voiced matriarch pointed out. You adapted human tactics to use their own technology against them.
You showed mercy to your defeated foes and wisdom in negotiating peace.
What more qualifications could you need?
Besides, the first matriarch added with clear amusement, you have already passed the most difficult test.
Which is? You convinced a council of matriarchs to approve of a human, she said with something that might have been a laugh.
That alone qualifies you for diplomatic service. Marcus found himself smiling despite the weight of the decision before him.
When would this start?
The first colony ships launch in 3 months, the Jade matriarch said.
Training begins immediately upon your acceptance. And if I say no?
Then, you return to Earth with our blessing and the knowledge that you are always welcome among the Veiltheri, the eldest said gently. But, Marcustion of Terra, opportunities like this come rarely, even across the span of centuries. Marcus closed his eyes and thought about everything that had brought him to this moment.
A chance encounter with a beautiful alien in a diplomatic cafe on Luna Station.
Months of learning about each other's cultures, falling in love despite the vast differences between their species.
And, now this impossible opportunity to be part of something unprecedented in galactic history.
When he opened his eyes, he found all 7 matriarchs watching him with expressions of patient curiosity. I need to talk to Zara first, he said.
Of course, the eldest agreed. Take all the time you need. But, Marcus? Yes, honored one?
Whatever you decide, know that you have already changed things simply by being here. Your species has made an impression on the galactic community, and much of that impression comes from individuals like you who show what humans can become. As Marcus left the heart chamber, his mind was spinning with possibilities and implications. The corridors of the station seemed different now, full of potential futures that he'd never imagined possible. He found Zara waiting for him in the guest quarters, pacing with nervous energy. She looked up as he entered, her expression anxious.
How did it go? She asked.
They offered me a job, Marcus said, still hardly believing it himself.
Zara's face lit up with joy. The colony program? You knew? I hoped.
She threw her arms around him, and he could feel her happiness radiating through their empathic connection.
Marcus, this is incredible.
We could work together, explore new worlds, help build something that's never existed before. It means leaving Earth, Marcus said softly.
Leaving everything I've known behind.
Zara pulled back to look at him, her expression growing serious.
I know it's a lot to ask. If you don't want to do it, I'll understand. We can find another way.
Marcus cupped her face in his hands, looking into those luminous eyes that had become so precious to him.
Are you kidding? The chance to explore the galaxy with the woman I love, helping to build bridges between species?
It's terrifying and impossible and probably insane.
And? Zara asked, holding her breath. Marcus grinned. And it's the most human thing I've ever heard of. When do we start?
Zara's laughter rang through the quarters like music, and, as she kissed him, Marcus could taste the future on her lips. It was bright and strange and full of possibilities he couldn't even imagine. But, as they held each other in the alien room aboard the Impossible Station, surrounded by the vast tapestry of galactic civilization, Marcus realized that he'd never been more certain of anything in his life. The universe was huge and complex and sometimes hostile. But it was also full of wonders beyond counting, and now he had the chance to explore them with someone who saw the same potential in humanity that he was just beginning to glimpse in himself. Later that evening, as they prepared to return to Zara's family with the news of their decision, Marcus stood once again at the viewport looking out at the streams of ships coming and going from Nexus Prime. But, now instead of feeling small and insignificant, he felt part of something vast and magnificent.
Ready? Zara asked, taking his hand.
Marcus squeezed her fingers gently.
Ready.
Together, they walked back into the warm light of the diplomatic quarters, toward a future that would test everything they thought they knew about love, courage, and what it meant to be human among the stars. 6 months later, Marcus stood on the observation deck of the colony ship New Horizons, watching an alien sun rise over a world that had never known intelligent life. The planet below was a swirl of blue and green, with 3 small moons hanging like jewels in its azure sky. According to the surveys, it had breathable atmosphere, abundant water, and no hostile native life forms.
It would be their new home. Second thoughts? Zara asked, joining him at the viewport.
She wore the practical jumpsuit of a colonial administrator, her hair pulled back in a utilitarian braid, but she was still the most beautiful thing Marcus had ever seen.
Not about this, Marcus replied, slipping his arm around her waist. But I keep thinking about what your brother said before we left. Zara's expression darkened slightly. Theclon was being dramatic. He said we were naive children playing with forces we didn't understand.
That mixing human ambition with Veiltheri empathy was a recipe for disaster.
And, what do you think?
Marcus considered the question as he watched the planet turn slowly below them. In the past 6 months, he'd learned more about galactic politics than he'd ever wanted to know.
The colony program wasn't just about exploration and cooperation.
It was about power, influence, and the delicate balance between species that had kept the galaxy relatively peaceful for centuries.
I think he's probably right about us not understanding everything, Marcus admitted.
But I also think that's exactly why we might succeed where others have failed. Through the viewport, he could see other ships in their small fleet.
The Zephyrian research vessel Crystal Song, its faceted hull refracting sunlight into rainbow patterns.
The massive Cronin construction ship Stone Builder, bristling with industrial equipment. Even a sleek Voidwalker energy ship, its contents mysterious even to their closest allies. 12 species, working together to build something unprecedented. It should have been impossible. Colony Administrator Chen, came a voice from behind them. Marcus turned to see Captain Veltar, the Veiltheri mission commander, approaching with her characteristic calm authority. She was older than Zara, with deep crimson skin and silver eyes that seemed to see everything. Captain, Marcus replied, straightening into something approaching military posture. The Planetary Council is ready for you, Veltar said. The final site survey has been completed, and the engineering teams need your approval to begin construction.
Marcus nodded. In the past months, he'd somehow become the de facto human representative for the entire colonial effort. It hadn't been planned that way, but human psychology had apparently proven useful for mediating between the more exotic alien mindsets. As they walked through the ship's corridors toward the council chamber, Marcus reflected on how much his life had changed. The training period had been intense, covering everything from xenobiology to diplomatic protocol to emergency colonial procedures. He'd learned to communicate with species that thought in mathematical concepts, others that experienced time differently than humans, and at least one group that existed partially in dimensions he couldn't perceive. But the hardest part had been learning to work with the other humans in the program. The colonial service had attracted a specific type of person from Earth. Scientists, engineers, explorers, diplomats. All brilliant, all dedicated, all absolutely convinced they knew the best way to do things. Managing that many strong personalities would have been challenging enough without adding the complications of multiple alien species with their own agendas. Marcus, Zara said quietly as they walked, "There's something I need to tell you before the council meeting." "What is it?"
The Voidwalkers made a request. They want to establish a research facility on the planet's northern continent.
Marcus stopped walking. "What kind of research?"
They wouldn't say. But Veltar thinks it has something to do with the dimensional anomalies the surveys detected.
Dimensional anomalies? Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Why is this the first I'm hearing about this?
Because the readings were so faint that most of the science team thought they were equipment errors, Captain Veltar interjected. But the Voidwalkers have much more sensitive detection equipment. If they're interested, it means the anomalies are real. Marcus rubbed his temples, feeling a familiar headache building. In the past months, he'd learned that every decision in a multi-species colony had implications he couldn't anticipate. What seemed like a simple choice often turned out to affect relationships between civilizations that had been developing for millennia. "What does the council think?" he asked.
"Mixed," Veltar admitted.
The Zephyrians are excited about the research possibilities. The Cronins are worried about structural integrity if we're dealing with dimensional instabilities. The other species are waiting to see what the human representative decides.
"Why me?"
"Because," Zara said with a slight smile, "humans have a talent for making decisions that shouldn't work but somehow do. The council has learned to trust your species' unconventional wisdom." They entered the council chamber, a circular room with seats arranged to accommodate the various physiological needs of the different species. The Zephyrians floated in crystalline suspension fields, their harmonic voices creating gentle music as they communicated. The massive Cronin delegates sat on reinforced platforms, their stone-like skin etched with symbols that glowed when they spoke. In the center of the room, a holographic display showed the planet below in perfect detail. Red markers indicated the proposed colony sites, while a new blue marker pulsed on the northern continent.
"Administrator Chen," rumbled Groktar, the lead Cronin engineer. His voice was like distant avalanches, transmitted through the room's translation systems. "We must discuss this Void Walker proposal."
Marcus took his seat and activated his personal translation matrix. Almost immediately, he could feel the complex web of emotions and thoughts flowing through the chamber.
The Zephyrians radiated curiosity and excitement.
The Cronins projected stability and caution. The other species each contributed their own emotional tones to the mental symphony.
"What are the risks?" Marcus asked directly. Silana, the Zephyrian science coordinator, chimed a response. "Dimensional anomalies can be unpredictable.
They might be remnants of natural phenomena, or they could indicate previous attempts at dimensional manipulation. If the Voidwalkers are correct about their nature, studying them could advance our understanding of spacetime mechanics by centuries. Or, Groktar countered, they could destabilize the planet's physical structure and kill every living thing on the surface.
Has anyone asked the Voidwalkers what they think these anomalies actually are? Marcus asked.
A shimmer in the air indicated the presence of the Voidwalker representative, though Marcus still couldn't see them clearly. When they spoke, their words seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "We believe," the Voidwalker said, "that this world was once home to a species that achieved dimensional transcendence. The room fell silent.
Dimensional transcendence was a theoretical concept that most galactic civilizations considered impossible.
The idea that an entire species could evolve beyond physical existence was the stuff of legend and speculation.
You're saying there were people here who evolved into pure energy? Marcus asked. Not evolved. Chose.
The Voidwalker's presence seemed to intensify. We have found traces of technology, deliberate manipulations of dimensional barriers.
This species didn't transcend naturally.
They built their way out of physical reality. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's air conditioning.
And, you want to study how they did it?
We want to understand why they left, the Voidwalker corrected.
And, whether they might return.
The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. They weren't just talking about an abandoned world anymore. They were potentially dealing with a planet whose previous inhabitants might still exist in some form, watching from dimensions beyond human comprehension.
This changes everything, Marcus said, looking around the council chamber.
We can't establish a colony on a world that might still be inhabited. The dimensional traces are over 10,000 years old, Solana chimed.
Whatever happened here is ancient history.
Unless time moves differently for dimensional beings, Groktar rumbled.
Then, 10,000 years might be 10 minutes. Marcus stood and walked to the holographic display, studying the planet that had seemed so perfect for their purposes.
Now it looked mysterious and, potentially dangerous. I need to make a recommendation to the full Colonial Board, he said finally.
But, I think we need more information before we proceed. What kind of information?
Veltar asked.
Marcus turned back to the Voidwalker representative. Can your people determine if these dimensional entities are still present? Can you communicate with them if they are? The shimmer in the air grew more pronounced. We can try.
But, such contact would be unprecedented. The risks to both our species and yours would be considerable.
What kind of risks? Dimensional beings exist outside normal spacetime, the Voidwalker explained.
Contact with them could fundamentally alter the nature of anyone involved.
You might not remain entirely human. Zara stood abruptly. Absolutely not.
Marcus, you can't seriously be considering this.
I'm not considering anything yet, Marcus replied.
But, we need to understand what we're dealing with. If there are intelligent beings still connected to this world, we need to know about it before we start building cities. The council chamber erupted into discussion, with each species contributing their own perspective on the situation. The Zephyrians were fascinated by the scientific possibilities. The Cronans wanted to find a different planet entirely. Several other species were split between curiosity and caution. Through it all, Marcus found himself thinking about the conversation he'd had with the matriarchs 6 months earlier. They'd told him that humans had the potential for both great destruction and great compassion, and that the path they chose would affect many others. Now he was facing exactly that kind of choice. There's another option, Zara said suddenly, her voice cutting through the debate.
We could ask them.
The room fell silent again.
Ask who? Veltar inquired. The dimensional beings, Zara replied.
If they're still connected to this world, they probably already know we're here.
Instead of trying to study them or avoid them, we could simply try to communicate directly.
Marcus stared at his girlfriend, impressed once again by her ability to find solutions he couldn't see.
You want to send them a message? Not a message. An invitation.
We tell them what we want to do, ask for their permission, and see what happens.
Groktar's laugh sounded like falling boulders. You want to ask permission from beings that might not even exist anymore to colonize a planet they abandoned 10,000 years ago? Why not?
Marcus said, the idea beginning to appeal to him.
It's polite.
And, if they do still exist, it shows we respect their prior claim to the world.
The Voidwalker representative seemed to consider this.
Such an approach would be unusual.
Most species either ignore dimensional beings entirely or try to exploit them.
Simple courtesy has rarely been attempted.
Most species aren't human, Marcus pointed out.
We specialize in unusual approaches.
Over the next hour, they worked out the details. The Voidwalkers would use their dimensional technology to broadcast a simple message into the space around the planet. It would explain who they were, what they wanted to do, and ask for permission to proceed. If there was no response after a reasonable period, they would assume the world was truly abandoned. If there was a response, well, they'd deal with that when it happened. The message was crafted carefully, with input from the linguistics experts of all 12 species. It needed to be simple enough to be universally understood, but respectful enough to avoid causing offense to beings whose nature they could barely comprehend. Marcus found himself writing the final draft, drawing on his experience with first contact protocols from the Human Diplomatic Service. To any intelligent beings connected to this world, we are representatives of 12 species from the Galactic Council. We seek to establish a peaceful colony on your world, to learn and grow together in harmony. We do not wish to intrude where we are unwelcome. If you still have claim to this place, please let us know. If you are willing to share it, we would be honored by your acceptance. If you prefer we find another world, we will respect your wishes. We await your response with hope and patience. Think it'll work? Zara asked as they prepared to broadcast the message. Honestly? I have no idea, Marcus admitted. But it feels right. The Voidwalkers sent the message into the dimensional spaces around the planet, using technology that made Marcus's head hurt to contemplate. Then, they waited. 3 days passed without any response. The science teams used the time to conduct more detailed surveys, mapping potential colony sites and resources. Marcus spent the time learning more about dimensional theory than any human had probably ever known, preparing for the possibility that they might actually receive an answer. On the 4th day, reality rippled. Marcus was in his quarters, reviewing colony logistics reports, when he felt something change. The air itself seemed to vibrate, and colors appeared that he didn't have names for. For a moment, he thought he was having some kind of medical emergency. Then, he heard the voice. It didn't come through his ears. Instead, it seemed to speak directly into his consciousness, bypassing all normal sensory channels. The words were in English, but carried harmonics and meanings that went far beyond anything human language could express. Little ones, the voice said, and Marcus could feel ancient amusement behind it. How polite you are. Marcus tried to speak and found his vocal cords weren't working. But, somehow, his thoughts seemed to reach the entity. Are you the previous inhabitants of this world? We were many things, the voice replied. Inhabitants is one of them. We are the HFY, and, yes, this world was once our home. Throughout the ship, alarms began sounding as other people experienced the same contact. Marcus could hear Zara calling his name through their cabin's comms system, but he found he couldn't move to respond. Are we intruding? Marcus asked mentally. Everything intrudes on everything else, the HFY replied. The question is whether the intrusion is welcome. You asked permission. In 10,000 years, you are the first to show such courtesy. Then, you'll let us stay? There was a pause, and Marcus felt the HFY consciousness examining not just him, but somehow the entire colonial fleet. It was like being studied under a microscope, but gently, with the care of a scientist who didn't want to damage the specimen. Your species is young, the HFY said finally. Full of potential, both bright and dark. The others with you are older, more stable. Together, you might create something interesting. Is that a yes? It is a conditional yes, the HFY replied, and Marcus could sense something like laughter in its mental voice. We will share our former home with you, but with certain understandings. What kind of understandings? First, the dimensional research facility your energy friends wish to build. We will permit it, but we will also participate in it. There are things about dimensional transcendence that the Voidwalkers do not yet understand. Marcus tried to process that. You're offering to teach us? We are offering to learn together. Transcendence is not a destination, it is a journey. And journeys are more interesting with companions. And, second? Second, you will establish your colony not just on our world, but with our guidance. We have learned much in our 10,000 years beyond physical form. perhaps it is time we shared that knowledge. The presents began to fade, but not before Marcus felt one final communication. Build well, little ones. Create something worthy of the gift you have been given. And, remember, the universe is vast and full of wonders. Some of them are waiting for you to grow wise enough to appreciate them. Reality snapped back to normal with an almost audible pop. Marcus found himself sitting on the floor of his cabin, with Zara kneeling beside him looking worried. Marcus! Are you all right? The whole ship felt that, whatever that was. Marcus stood slowly, his mind still reeling from the contact. I think, he said carefully, that we just got approval from the previous tenants. Word of the contact spread quickly through the colonial fleet. Within hours, Marcus found himself in another council session, this time trying to explain an experience that went beyond normal language. They want to help us, he said for the third time. The HFY aren't hostile. They're curious about what we'll build. Beings that exist outside normal spacetime want to help us build a colony, Groktar rumbled skeptically. Forgive me if I find that difficult to believe. Believe it or not, the Voidwalker representative interjected, the dimensional readings support the human's account. We are detecting massive, controlled alterations to local spacetime. The HFY are real, and they are powerful beyond our current understanding. Solana's harmonic voice chimed with excitement. The research possibilities are incredible. We could learn about post-physical existence, dimensional manipulation, technologies beyond our current science. Or, Veltar said calmly, we could find ourselves overwhelmed by forces we're not equipped to handle. Marcus looked around the council chamber, seeing fear and excitement warring in equal measure. He understood both reactions. The HFY represented something unprecedented in galactic history, a successfully transcended species that was willing to interact with physical beings. There's something else, Marcus said. The HFY mentioned that transcendence is a journey, not a destination. I think they're suggesting that all of our species might eventually follow the same path. Evolution beyond physical form, Zara mused. It would explain why they're willing to help us. We might be their successors. The debate continued for hours, but, in the end, the decision was unanimous. The opportunity to learn from a transcended species was too valuable to pass up, despite the risks. Over the following weeks, construction of the first colonial settlement began with guidance from the HFY. It was unlike anything any of the species had attempted before. The city that emerged seemed to exist partially in normal space and, partially in dimensions that bent the mind to contemplate. Buildings grown from crystallized thought stood beside more conventional structures. Gardens bloomed with plants that existed in multiple dimensional states simultaneously. And, through it all, the gentle presence of the HFY guided and taught. Marcus found himself changed by the experience. Prolonged contact with dimensional beings had subtle effects on physical consciousness. He began to perceive layers of reality he'd never noticed before, to understand connections between seemingly unrelated events. But, perhaps more importantly, he began to understand what the matriarchs had seen in him. Humans didn't just have the potential for destruction or compassion. They had the potential for growth beyond anything they'd previously imagined. Do you regret it? Zara asked one evening as they stood together watching the alien sunset over their new city. The sky was painted in colors that existed only in this dimensional confluence, and the HFY's presence was a warm comfort in the back of their minds. Regret what? Everything. Leaving Earth, joining the colony program, taking responsibility for decisions that affect entire civilizations. Marcus considered the question as he watched Cronin children playing with Zephyri and Young in the park below, their games supervised by beings of pure energy who had once been a physical species themselves. No, he said finally. No regrets at all. Zara smiled and leaned against him. Good. Because I have a feeling this is just the beginning. Marcus wrapped his arms around her and smiled as well. The future stretched before them, vast and full of possibilities they couldn't even imagine yet. But, whatever came next, they would face it together, human and Veiltheri, physical and dimensional, building something that had never existed before. In the distance, the HFY sang songs that existed in mathematics and emotion,
welcoming their new neighbors to a world that belonged to everyone and no one, where the impossible happened every day and the only limit was the courage to keep growing. It was, Marcus thought, a very human kind of paradise.